What is up, everybody? Shotgun Crypto here. In this video, we're going to be looking into Ethereum. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be looking into some very interesting patterns that I see on the chart right now, unscripted. I was going to say live, but technically this isn't a live stream, because if I were to have a live stream, I'd probably have no audience, right? Because I have no subscribers. First video. But anyways, let's just dive into this. We're going to be looking into some interesting patterns that I see. We're going to be looking into our trajectory from here, as well as a near-term price target of about $2,700 for Ethereum if our pattern holds up. So let's just dive right in. So as you can see from the chart on screen, we see almost a cycle of sorts being played out. And I've highlighted that by drawing the two blue boxes. And I'll explain what those are. So the two blue boxes, the first one, the one on the left, box number one, that I drew from the dip, as you can tell, from the dip at the very bottom all the way up to our last all-time high. And I'm saying last all-time high because hopefully we'll break it this time, right? But anyways, our all-time high, our current all-time high by the at the time of this recording. So that's the end of the box, that's the upper limit of the box, and the lower being the dip at the very bottom. And so I took that, cloned it, superimposed it onto what I see as a cycle being replayed, the one that we're in right now. And so that I took that, extrapolated it, and put it onto our second, put it onto where we are right now, the cycle we're in right now. I'm calling it a cycle because, as you can see on the charts, you see a very remarkable resemblance between these two boxes, right? If you look at the pattern, so you see you start off with this huge dip, then you go up, bump number one, right? Go back down. You do kind of like an oscillating sawtooth 1-2 1-2 pattern before you go all the way up to bump number two. And so from bump number two, you see it going back down, retracing, kind of, it's basically, it goes down to bump number one, right? In order to test that level of support, which at the time of bump number one was still a level of resistance, and we overcame that. We want to retest that. That's been affirmed. Great. So let's go all the way up to bump number three. And so you see the same pattern being coming into play, right? You see it going back down to test bump number two. And once that's been checkboxed, you see it springboard all the way up to our last all-time high, which, as you all remember, was very short-lived, and then afterwards we have the painful dip all the way to the bottom. And so, but fret not, because as you can see, that dip brought us all the way back to the same pattern of sorts, or a very, very similar pattern of sorts, right? Because you start off with the dip, going into bump number one, you go back down to the 1-2 1-2 oscillating, right? Then you go back up again to bump number two. Even though, it doesn't match up perfectly from here, right? Because as you can see, bump number two did not surpass bump number one. And because of that, so just to finish the cycle, so go back down, go back up to bump number three, then we're heading down from at the time of this video, right? We're going downwards. And because bump number two is not as high, I wouldn't be surprised if at the time of this video, if we keep on going down, and if we go lower than where we were in the last cycle, in the last mini cycle, if you want to call it that, I wouldn't be surprised if we go down there. But one thing I do want to look out for in the next about 4 hours, 8 hours, maybe even 12 hours, but 4 to 8 hours, I would say, or maybe even sooner than that, but around that time frame, in the near term, I want to look out for a bump somewhere, just so we know that we have a solid level of support. And so from there, and that could be around somewhere between 2,400 to 2,300, somewhere around that range. And then once that's been checkboxed, if we could get a bounce from there, then I think that if our pattern holds up, which it looks good so far, then I think that would be a very bullish sign. Then we would go all the way up to perhaps setting a new all-time high. And if our pattern is correct, then as you can see, box number two, as I told you, was just an extrapolation of box number one. So if you open up box number two, as you can see from price number two, that's the upper limit, then we could be looking at a near-term price target of about 2,700 USD to Ethereum. And of course, it could go even higher from there, right? It could go down, go back up. And so, but in the near term, in this mini cycle that I've noticed, I think that would be a new, I mean, first of all, that would be an all-time high. That would be setting up a new all-time high, and that could be where we're looking at in the near term. And so some other patterns that I think would be interesting to supplement this. So beneath that chart, we see a MACD chart with blue and red, right? And beneath that, I've also pulled up the RSI. And so if you look at the MACD, or let's start with the RSI, I thought it was really interesting. So if you match that up to the same time interval for the two boxes, you see a very similar trend being played out, very similar pattern of box number one matching box number two. So you see it dropping in the very start of box number one all the way down to 30. And so then as the price goes up and up and up, up and away, of course, with the three bumps that we mentioned, of course, we see on the RSI, we see it also creeping up and down before we hit our all-time high. And when we do hit our all-time high, you see it kind of just licking the 70 range. And then once it goes into the 70, that's when we see that huge trigger of all the selling that goes on. And of course, with that, the huge dip that we all remember so painfully. And so from there, that kind of resets the clock. We go all the way down again, right? And so I'm sorry, this is kind of, there, that's better. So that was kind of, the button was blocking the way, right? So as you can see, it doesn't match up perfectly, but you also see that similar pattern of it going down from 70 to about 30. And then from there, it's creeping it up again. As you can see, it's almost hitting that 70 range. And so once you do hit that 70, I think that would be another thing, thing number two to look out for. Once you start touching that 70s range, you could be looking at, for the time being, the end of that, the peak, if you will. And then afterwards, if you're into trading, if you're into active trading, then that would be a good sell point at that point, because it could head down. Of course, it could head all the way back up again and set an even higher high. But for the time being, I think that would be another thing to look out for, that could be the end of these two blue box cycles, right? And so if you look at the MACD, you also see kind of, it more or less complements what you see in the RSI, in the sense that kind of you see a sudden narrowing between the two lines, between the two lines. And once you see that cross, of course, that's when the dip occurs. But definitely in the new cycle, what you want to look out for is if you see a sudden stricture of sorts, a sudden very sharp narrowing, then I think that would be, that would kind of be an albatross of sort, a harbinger of a dip from the new all-time high. If we set that new all-time high at about 2,700 USD, right? And so definitely that's all I want to talk about. Those are the three patterns. I don't want to take up too much of your precious time, right? And so if you enjoy these videos, definitely, this is my first video, right? Everybody's got to start somewhere. I'm kind of like a low cap crypto commentator, if you will, right? So if you enjoy these videos, definitely smash that like button, share with all your friends, leave a comment down below. Definitely, I want to see your feedback. I'm doing this really just because I want to see if we could foster a community here on this channel. I want to see your feedback if you really liked the video, if you really enjoyed my insights, if you thought it was interesting, or conversely, if you think these videos freaking suck, if you think this is all just really stupid, let me know too. I want to see it. And also, of course, any suggestions, any constructive criticism, any feedback would all be really appreciated. And if you really enjoy this, if you really enjoy my work, if you really want to look into my future videos, then be sure to click that subscribe button. That's how we get this channel growing. Click on that subscribe button. If you really want to make my day, then definitely click on that bell notification, enable all notifications, because that's what I started doing with all these crypto, with all my favorite crypto channels. Hopefully I could be your favorite crypto channel, right? But definitely that is it.